Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of HangarReady. Today, we are joined by the Fighter Mafia, and these guys have been working really hard to try to understand what it means to fly and fight together as a team. Oftentimes, I think we fly as individuals or maybe loosely as friends, but what we're really talking about is getting into the benefits of being in an organization and a training program. And everyone here has various levels of experience and background, but everyone here has been very dedicated and contributed to what I believe is the foundation of meeting the challenges of Star Citizen as an organization. It has been my pleasure to work with these guys. They are amazing at just being resilient and listening to things. It's made Star Citizen more enjoyable to me. But although we've achieved a high level, I think anyone can achieve this with a little bit of practice and dedication. And maybe it'll inspire you to want to play with friends or potentially join an org that we might know. Anyhow, before I put the co-hosts in the hot seat, I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and how we got here. So I joined this group before we were even involved with ADI. We were in a mil sim. And prior to that, I'd done some sort of arcade flying and some basic games. And through time, I've gotten involved with some combat fighters with like an F-16. And I've really enjoyed that. And now moving into Star Citizen, trying to apply that here, I've had a lot of fun. But through my time with this group, I've really made some good friends and I've learned a lot of things in some technical aspects, as well as, a good friend can be a mirror and point out things that you don't see. And in this group here, we've all had to point out different things from a different perspective to help to get to where we are. So to put our first new co-host into the hot seat, Thornister, how are you today?
I'm doing absolutely fine, thank you.
And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Sure. I'm Thornister. I'm from the Netherlands in Europe. And when around 2015, I first heard of Star Citizen, the Kickstarter, and I was not into Kickstarters at all. I was still playing EVE Online at that time. But I got bored with EVE. It's too slow for my taste these days. And then I started seeing some Star Citizen YouTube videos, and I thought, let's check it out. So I bought my starter package and started playing. I then read the Death of a Spaceman post, and I thought, wow, this healing stuff is amazing. But healing on your own is not very fun. So I joined an org, met some friends, started flying with friends, and found out that the healing game could be fun. But the fighting game is what really drew me in. And from there, I jumped into the deep end.
Outstanding. And I'm assuming you're enjoying your time with this organization?
Oh, absolutely. I'm having a blast. Flying with friends is the thing.
Yes. And you and I have only killed each other a few times, so we're all good.
Maybe a few times a day.
Water Walker, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. So a bit nervous for this first show here, but everything's fine.
Yeah. Well, I had to get through my introduction, so hopefully I did that all right. But why don't you introduce yourself to us, please?
I'm Water Walker. I'm from Germany. I started with the Star Citizen playing somewhere in 2015, joined the org in about 2016. I have some background with Chris Roberts' games, so I started way back in the early 90s with Wing Commander, all games from the series, bit freelancer, Make a Break, and started gaming about 5-6 years ago again.
Outstanding. Well, it's been fun. I don't think we've killed each other, but I'm sure we will soon. Eritrea, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I am Eritrea, which I would like people to pronounce Eritrea, but obviously that's not really realistic. I am from Czech Republic, Central Europe, but with my sleep schedule, I am somewhat of an American myself.
A late night owl, huh?
Very much so. I don't have much prior experience with flight simulators or even space games, other than some mobile games back in the day. But as soon as I got my gaming computer, Star Citizen was the first game basically I downloaded, and I've been playing it since 2018. And I saw that there are so many things in Star Citizen that you just cannot do well, if at all, without an organized group. And I found ADI, and it seemed like the best choice out there.
You know, it's interesting because for me, I really like teamwork and I like working together with people, and I like to see other people that enjoy that as well. Drake Steele, how are you today?
Oh, I'm just fine. Yeah, my name is Drake Steele. I'm from Charleston, West Virginia, which is on the east coast of the United States. My history with gaming, with flying, is not too much. I mean, I've played a lot of space games. I've always enjoyed the sci-fi games, and I've heard about Star Citizen back when it was a Kickstarter, but I just kind of like loosely followed it. I didn't really cover it. And then one day there was a YouTube video I was watching, and a person was talking about like Lorville and how there was actually now a planet that you could go visit, go ride a tram. It was buggy, but still enjoyable. So that's kind of what was got me to finally check out Star Citizen for real. So I got a game package, and I started kind of, I guess what they would call a tourist, just kind of going around all the different areas, doing some like trading missions and box missions. That's kind of how I learned how to get around and everything. And then after that, I kind of was thinking about like, you know, how could I make this game better? And so I started looking at orgs, and yeah, ADI kind of popped out because I figured it'd be a good way for me to get into multiplayer games and just kind of get comfortable, like find out what it's about, like why multiplayer games are so popular. So I joined, and yeah, I've been enjoying it ever since. I've been doing a lot of org ops, you know, and I'm really enjoying the multiplayer scene. And yeah, that's about it.
You know, I'm always stunned at the visualness of this game. I think when we have the new ports flying above the planets, I think the first time I walked out and saw we're kind of at a tilted angle and just how beautiful it was, I was stunned again. So I keep enjoying that part of this game. Last and certainly not least, Scientifico, how are you today?
Doing pretty good. I'm HW Scientifico, the other California native. I've always had a pretty large interest in aviation growing up, and to the point of getting around to about 2 weeks of flight experience in a Cessna 172. Haven't gotten my license yet. I'd like to do that sometime soon. But as far as simulators and video games are concerned, I'm kind of a noob there. I've only really had experience flying in games like Battlefield or even like the Tom Clancy Hawks games and stuff. Very like archaic kind of stuff. But Star Citizen was a big turn on for me because of how ambitious it is as a project. Just the depth that they're shooting for is unparalleled to anything I've ever seen, and that really kind of turned me on to that. And then, of course, Josh got me into a couple others too, like DCS and Flight Simulator, the new Microsoft Flight Simulator. But yeah, I mean, that kind of takes me to ADI now. I remember probably a month into playing Star Citizen, I just got an invite out of the blue to Atlas Defense Industries. I'm like, what's this? And look at their website and like, wow, this looks like a really cool organization. I should probably try and be a part of it. And have not been disappointed ever since, like making that decision. That was really just a great thing to do. I think for me to be able to experience such an organized group like this, it's been just amazing.
Yeah, and if you hang out with me long enough, you'll end up flying something. It just sort of oozes off of me. Well, welcome everyone. I hope everyone enjoys getting to know our co-hosts here. We want to put this show together to try to talk about these things and enjoy it. This whole thing started with a Friday flight night. And Water Walker, do you want to talk about that with us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, back in 2017, 2018, we started with these Friday flight nights. So to have some organized, missions inside of Star Citizen. So it was all back in the 2.6 version. So not really with mission sharing. So we have to walk it in a different way. So everybody accepted the old famous Tessa missions. And then we start flying around, doing the missions, fighting together. And there, mostly everything started a bit, that people are, more coordinated in flight, not playing on their own, talking a bit, killing some enemies, and all this stuff. Yeah, and this thing then evolves to the next steps. So a lot of people joined. We had these flight nights in EU time and US time. And yeah, it was always about 4 to 8 people who joined there. So it was a fun time in 2.6. And then it's getting even better with 3.0 and all the other stuff like linked quantum come in to the game, what was all missing in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really the beginning of sort of any level of organization. And that kind of turned into what we now call formation flying. It used to be box flying, which I would encourage any of our members to come in and join, because what we're going to get into today and how to fly and fight as a group, these are some of the really beginning basic steps that you'll need. But Scientifico, you were there at the beginning of formation flying. Why don't you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, back when I was an assistant director in the air group of our fleet security division, I was tasked with spinning up basically what the Friday Flight Nights was again. We had it on a hiatus for a couple of years. And back then, yeah, it was called box flying. And the reason for that was a pretty common technique for orbiting an area to like accomplish a combat air patrol or something like that is to actually fly in a box shape. Because it's easier to fly in a straight line and then make a 90-degree turn and then keep flying straight with particularly with a HOTAS. With a mouse and keyboard, you can argue that you could just set your mouse on a certain part of your mouse pad and just leave it there and make a perfect circle. But regardless, the point of it was to introduce our members in the org to a more coordinated way of flying. Most of the time, people who hop in the game are used to just flying with maybe one other buddy or something like that, but not really in an organized fashion like what we do in our org ops. And I mean, you just think like trying to actually stay in a formation with 3 other guys can be pretty complicated if you're not used to it. So that was kind of the idea behind it, was to get more experience or give an opportunity to provide more experience for our members to be better equipped to do things like caps in our org ops. So basically what these sessions contained was some brief introduction to brevity terms to keep comms nice and simple and brief to the point, as well as some fundamental formations like diamonds, wedges, some echelon lefts, rights, some trail formations, and then also how to stay in those formations while making maneuvers like left hand or right hand turns, even like split S's, for instance. Trying to think. Quantum linking was another big part of it. If you're not familiar with Star Citizen, there's a pretty easy to screw up procedure for quantuming in a group. Basically, the flight lead needs to spool their quantum drive first, and then everyone else in the flight can spool their quantum drives in order to sync up properly for a quantum jump to a new location. And oftentimes, with people who aren't experienced flying into groups, everyone will spool their drive at the same time, and then that will confuse the game as to like who's actually leading the quantum jump, and that always causes delays in our org ops. So that was another point of the formation flying, was to help mitigate those delays that we have so often.
So you're saying Star Citizen presents some challenges?
Yes. I guess you could say that. Yes. More often than not, it's more about learning the workarounds to these bugs than
features.
Actually, yes.
Features. I think we've had some posts in our forums about several workarounds, but again, that's another benefit of having groups that work with it. When you were teaching these box flyings and these different maneuvers, obviously this was at slow speed and at a basic step, but did you notice any difference with peripherals that people were using, mouse and keyboard versus a joystick or anything like that?
Yes, for sure. There were definitely times where, in particular, people with a mouse and keyboard would have difficulty keeping up in turns. Going in straight lines and stuff, there wasn't really too much of a difference, but particularly in the turns, because of how, shall we say, digital keyboards are, doing something like a coordinated turn where you're actually rolling and yawing at the same time can be quite difficult to accomplish on a mouse and keyboard, because the moment you hit that Q or E key to roll your ship, it's all on or all off. There's no like slight adjustments to your roll, and that makes it difficult to I guess smoothly keep with the flight. And then
Yeah.
of course the HOTAS, it's more analog, so you got more control.
Absolutely. And for anyone that might be thinking, why would we do slow flights and why would we do these sort of what's considered a parade formation where you have two aircraft that are very, very close together? Well, when we get to moving a lot more dynamically and a lot faster, and when you're in combat, these basic skills and just getting your orientation is really important. You mentioned org ops. We had some other people talk about org ops. We had incorporated some lessons learned. I know when I came back to fleet security, I had added, a quick thing for the formation flying of could we talk about how to set up a formation? Someone else came in and added, rejoins where your aircraft are separated and rejoining. So it's been interesting to see the evolution of these things come through and how we've had workarounds and learning together and just understanding what it all means and how it works. To me, though, what we're really doing is we're kind of building our bucket. And when you're flying by yourself, little differences in where you are, or how fast you're going, and what turns you make don't have as big of a difference. But when you're trying to fly in formation with someone and directly support them as a fighter, it's real easy to get target fixation. I know when I started working with the Fighter Mafia, because they did some work before I got involved, I was trying to follow my lead, and all I could do was be target fixated on that first aircraft. It was really hard for me to get engaged with and be a part of the actual combat fight. We don't have G-forces, and I'm not getting fuzzy or anything like that, but it still has an impact, and you got to build a bucket, meaning that when you begin to process and hold more information in that bucket, not just the position you're in, the speed you're going, the formation. Now you got to think about, the target and where they're at, what your orientation is. Are you in a position to fire? What weapons are you using? So building that bucket is very, very important. And I think that first step in formation flying is a really important foundation to move forward. What do you think about that, Thornister?
Oh, absolutely. You need proper control over your ship. Otherwise, in combat, in a 1v1, you can probably get away with it. But once you start doing 2v1s, and you have your own wingman, and you need to take care of deconfliction, because, dying to the enemy is one thing, but dying by crashing into your buddy is kinda embarrassing.
And it's a big no-no. We don't want to do that, right? Taking out your own guys is a huge problem.
Yes. And in a 2v1, it's one thing, but hopefully at some point we're gonna have 10v10s or something like that. And at that point, deconfliction is probably going to be far more important than anything the enemy is doing. So learning the basics of flying, of controlling your ship, of learning the basics of situational awareness, of communicating with your wingman, or even with the rest of your flight or the rest of your squadron, it's essential.
Drake, I know that you had some challenges with this. You've developed greatly and have contributed a ton. What advice would you give for someone who's new, trying to get into box flying?
Well, when I started out, I mainly played with a keyboard and mouse, which I was able to do all right. But I realized that, as Scientifico was saying, it's kind of hard to do like analog inputs because of the way the keyboard is laid out, and you have to constantly strafe left and right, and not strafe, roll left and right. And so I kind of like started migrating over to a stick and throttle, which I felt helped a lot. And in formation flight, it just I felt it was kind of like a more natural fit. I was able to stay in formation easier, and after you practice for a while, it just kind of felt like I could just kind of do it while thinking of something else. It just kind of became like second nature to me, which which is one reason I've kind of learned to really like flying with the stick and throttle, and I just feel it's more natural, and yeah, I really enjoy it.
And that's what we were talking about before about building a bucket. When you say it becomes more natural, these things become automatic, and taking on another challenge and another step is where you can progress as an individual pilot. Airtree, I know you came from what you consider to be a humble position. Would you talk about like your growth and how formation flying and the steps we've done have improved you as a pilot?
Well, a lot, definitely. And it mainly gave me confidence. When I started, I was even having trouble paying attention to the orders and at the same time flying and keeping an eye on people around me and what they are doing. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily match what the flight lead says we are doing and what the other people in the flight are actually doing. And getting situational awareness, making the bucket bigger. But also, when I started in Star Citizen, I was having a stick and a mouse. And for the longest time, I was really into it. And it took a while to convince me to switch to a HOTAS. And yeah, with a stick in your left hand, keeping the speed exactly the same for long periods of time, or even setting a given speed was the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that speed control positioning, the situational awareness is something that, even though I've done a lot of flight sims with, is a struggle for me in Star Citizen because we're in a different environment. We're flying in space and things are moving at a different pace. So in any new flight, there's a new challenge. And so I'm glad to see that kind of progression. And I feel like those are some of the important things, again, that organizations can provide and that we can do well as a team. So I appreciate that. Thornister, I know we talked a little bit about the formation flying, but people tended to come back and they seem to enjoy it. When people did come back, what kind of improvements did you see out of them versus maybe the first time they were there?
So for most people who join a formation flying session for the first time, making those coordinated turns is a real challenge. I mean, I remember my first formation flying, I was still flying mouse and keyboard at the time, and I had a real challenge to keep up. So I switched to a HOTAS system really quickly, and from then on, it became much more easy. So what you see with people who join for the second, third, or even more times is that they start to get the hang of it. They start to be able to not just pay attention to the flying, but they can also start paying attention to communicating. They're building their bucket. So at some point they can even take over the flight as the flight lead, and at that point you don't need to only worry about flying yourself, but you need to also manage the flight. And for that, you just need that hands-on experience. You need to be able to fly with confidence. It's like driving a car. At your first driving lessons, you're spending all your time on controlling the vehicle, and you're not paying any attention at all to the traffic. And after you've been driving for a while, even paying attention to the traffic becomes like a second nature thing, and you start singing along with the radio. Same thing happens with the flying. After you've done it enough, it becomes second nature, and at that point you can start paying attention to all those management tasks that need doing, communicating with your wing lead, with your air group lead, actually paying attention to what the enemy is doing, which sort of helps in a fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we transition here to the next segment, where you guys went from sort of formation flying and doing these things and training people, you guys actually decided to try to fight together. And we started off with fighting against AI. I know that we were using more of a strict formation. The flight leads were calling out when we were going to turn in an attack, when we were going to try to get away, trying to talk about, what kind of targets we were after or where they were. I know we were using things like some preset speeds and some preset like turn rates and distances to kind of take an evolutionary step from one thing to the next. The time invested that it took to get to that point where you went from flying in a formation and not really trying to fight, and then fighting against the AI, how much time, Drake Steele, do you think it took for you guys to make that progression?
Well, when we started out, we just kind of practiced. Yeah, it was like me and Atria. We would get together and then practice against the AI. We did it for, I don't know, probably about 3 to 4 hours a day, and then we did it for maybe 9 times or so. So yeah, about 35, 40 hours to get really comfortable flying in formation while doing attack runs, and kind of knowing like what kind of messages and communication we could expect to come up next time. We have to do another pass and everything. It just kind of became second nature after that point, and then we kind of moved on to more of a 4v4. But yeah, that was kind of how we started out anyway.
And Artria, how about for you? What do you think the amount of time was for you to get to the point where you were comfortable going against the AI?
I think it was the first session when it finally clicked on me. Before that, I had really hard time sticking with my lead, and then it clicked. And I got quite comfortable from that point on. But of course, the additional sessions made it a second nature, as Drake said, that you didn't have to pay too much attention to your speed, for example. You were just watching your lead and but guessing basically how far away from them you are.
Absolutely. Drake, what do you think was, or excuse me, Water Walker, what do you think was some of the most important things we learned just flying against the AI?
It was mostly the situational awareness, matching the speeds, the distances. So if you're flying against an AI, or maybe also later also people, and you're in the wingman position, you're looking more to the distance to your flight lead than to your speed altimeter, and constantly changing your speed to match the speed of your flight lead. So this is something you can carry over from the formation flying to a boom and zoom test we performed here. So mostly we did all these things to get some practice to find out what's working here when we are flying together as a group, fighting as a group, how we can build up some trainings for these things, what is working, what is not working, what is working good for smaller ships or for bigger ships. Is there a difference? And what commands do we need to call out, or how is the communication going? So to have a clear, short communication in a fighting situation is really important, so that you know the words, the brevity, that you have clear comm channels, not talking that much when you're fighting, so that you can concentrate on what are you doing exactly at the moment.
So building that bigger bucket, having some more efficient comms, maybe having some more situational awareness to be aware of what's happening around you, and maybe even getting into things like the environment or asteroids, are all benefits that we got from fighting against the AI, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also how fast you can turn without losing your wingman or your flight lead.
Right.
So if you're flying on your own, you're mostly always using your full stick to do a turn. And if you're doing this in a coordinated flight situation, that won't work, because you will lose your orientation, or your wingman or the flight lead, the formation breaks down. You lost contact of your flight lead. You need to look out for them. So also we looked how fast can we go in a loop or in a turn, so that everybody's comfortable with it, and it's slower than you might do it on your own in a 1v1 fight.
So, Thornister, before we get into a PvP situation, what thoughts did you maybe have about someone joining in and how the combat might be the same or different versus an AI?
So you mean the transition from, or the difference between fighting AI and PvP fights?
Well, just what before you got there, did you have any thoughts about what the differences might be and what changes might come up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we all know that the AI is basically flying and fighting like an idiot. So the expectation was that a human opponent would make actual smart decisions. But I mean, we know from history that boom and zoom is a deadly fighter tactic. So the expectation was that the boom and zoom tactic we used versus AI would obviously need adjustments, but I mean, with minor adjustments, it should work just fine versus human opponents, especially in against a single human opponent. I mean, once you start fighting groups of human opponents, all bets are probably off. But
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of peripheral changes, I know Scientifico, you went from mouse and keyboard to a HOTAS and a profile. Would you like to share a little bit about that transition for you, and how it applied to flying with us, and what differences you might have seen or improvements?
Yes, so initially with my first steps with Star Citizen, it was serviceable to use a mouse and keyboard. But as I got more involved with the org, it kind of became apparent to me that, it'd probably be a good idea to finally take the plunge and get a HOTAS. And so I was like asking around, like, oh, what would be a good HOTAS? And CaliJoshua was like, well, hey, you can get a Warthog. That's pretty much as good as they get. And I'm like, sure, why not? Why not jump in and get the best thing there is out there at the moment? And I got a Warthog with his help picking out some parts and got to.
Well, you didn't just get a Warthog, you got the FSSB, the force sensing.
Yes.
And that basically, so you don't have any movement on the stick, or very little, as
Yeah.
opposed to a lot of analog sticks will move back and forth. It's based on force, which lets you go
Yes.
omnidirectional instantaneously, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah, it's got a ton of fidelity. I didn't even try it with the standard spring-loaded joystick. I just went straight to the FSSB, and I can't really comment on how it would have been without it, but I certainly wouldn't want to go to anything else, I think. So yeah, I mean, after using it for a while, it took me a while to kind of learn where all the binds were, shall we say, on the HOTAS. I'm also using one of CaliJoshua's profiles. That was another thing that kind of, I guess, convinced me to finally get one, was that CaliJoshua put together a profile that, from my point of view, was really well put together, and saved me the trouble of trying to figure out how to bind a bunch of keys on myself, right? So basically just was able to plug everything in and download a profile and was good to go right from the gate pretty much. So that was really nice.
Well, I spend a lot of time banging my head against the wall trying to figure that out. So I'm glad somebody uses it.
Yes.
In fact, for anyone who is using that profile, and there's been actually a lot of comments and response, and I thank those people. It does work for the new build, and I don't think there's any real changes. There'll be some for the next one. But the reason that this is important to talk about with you, Scientifico, is you did formation flying. Mm-hmm. You trained to that, but you skipped the flying we did with the AI, and you jumped right in afterwards. Now, these guys had pared this down a bit, and we had a basic idea of instruction. And you went straight into PvP flying, which we're going to talk about here in a second. Yep. But do you think you could have made that transition as easily without a HOTAS or a profile that you knew how to use?
No, definitely not. The one thing about mouse and keyboard compared to HOTAS is it's, at least in the keyboard case, it's a lot harder to execute what you intend to do reliably. I've had plenty of times where I've accidentally hit, like, I don't know, like the decouple key when trying to disengage the cruise control, for instance. And even just like locking and launching missiles can be cumbersome. with just a mouse and keyboard. But with a HOTAS, you got all the keys you could possibly need to do all the actions, and it's just like muscle. It's basically reduced to muscle memory. Is really all it is, and that just allows for a lot quicker and reliable execution, which is very important for PvP because things are happening a lot faster than when just against AI, just because of that unpredictable nature of PvP setting. So yeah, it was absolutely necessary to perform well to have a HOTAS.
We've got a question from the audience, and you did perform well pretty quickly at a basic level for the little time you had in. So I was glad to see that. Sir Toady has asked the question about what is your experience with the must-have minimums any HOTAS setup? To me, that's a two-part question because you're getting into what do you need in a joystick and what do you need in a profile. And in a joystick, hat switches are your friend. My profile is based on a systems-based design. So let's talk about what we call target management system, or TMS. So TMS is 4 ways, and I have a modifier, so it's really 8 buttons. And Star Citizen has an enormous amount of almost extraneous inputs that you need. So you can lock a target, you can lock your nearest target, you can lock a nearest friendly, you can cycle your hostiles, you can cycle your friendlies. So there's a lot of things on there that are different than what you might see in a modern combat fighter and some things like that. So I guess the main thing is the more hat switches you have, the better off it's going to be, the more options you're going to have to be able to target your enemies, to be able to manage your shields, to be able to defend yourself. So again, you just want a lot of hat switches. Within, what are those minimums? The basics are going to come down to being able to move, shoot, and communicate. But for your ship alone, I think you're going to need at least, I guess the basic systems are your shields management system, your target management system, your countermeasures management system, and you're going to need to have a way to communicate. And in an org situation, that's more than one button. So in my profiles, for the Warthog, I think there's 5 or 6 push-to-talks, but on the T-16,000, there's only 2. But you're going to need multiple channels to go through. So it's a lot of information to unpack. We could do a whole show just based on a profile design, and maybe we will. But to answer your question, you have at least 4 or 5 systems you're going to need. You're going to need a lot of HOTAS or a lot of hat switches for that. And the more accurate your throttle is, the more you get a smooth resistance to it. The same for the joystick. The more precise you're going to be, and the better you're going to be able to perform high-speed maneuvers. So I hope that answers your question. But what I want to do is I want to get some information from some of our co-hosts here, because we've had several people that have switched over. Drake, I know you switched, and we talked about that a little bit. Do you want to talk about what you went to and what you're using now? Oh, I'm sorry, what you started with and what you're using now?
Yeah, when I first started, I was pretty comfortable just using mouse and keyboard. I got kind of used to it. I've been flying with it for probably, I don't know, like at least a year, maybe even 18 months. But yeah, as I started doing formation flying and trying to do some more advanced like fighter type movements, I found that I kind of wanted to try out a HOTAS. So I was kind of asking around, and there were some people in the org that were recommending, like for the money, the VKB Gladiator NXT Premium, which is what I ended up getting. It's a $150 stick. It includes the stick in the base, so you don't have to buy them separately. It has plenty of controls. I could show it, but it's basically like it's a space sim stick. So it has like it's kind of a generic setup, but it's very ergonomic. It has a dual stage trigger, and then you have like a secondary trigger that you can push or pull, and then it's got like a joystick and 2 hats and I think 3 buttons. So it's got pretty much all the controls I needed to kind of migrate most of my most used controls over to the stick. And then after that, I kind of got used to that, and then I kind of wanted to get a throttle to go with it. But the thing is, with the way the pandemic is right now, it's kind of hard to get throttles. So I ended up going for a Thrustmaster 16,000. What is it called? The TWCS throttle.
And
I've been liking that a lot too. That's what I've been using right now.
What do you think, or if you had to give me maybe the top 4 or 5 most important buttons or things you use regularly on, obviously you're not using my profile, you're using something different, but what do you think are the most 4 or 5 important buttons on there?
Well, of course you have your fire buttons. I have my secondary trigger I use from my scanners to toggle between scanning and firing. And then I have one hat that's all my targeting, friendly, enemy, all, and what is it? Like components on a ship, that's one hat. And then another hat I use for countermeasures and pinning, like pinning and clearing my pins. And then on my throttle, I have like my afterburner. I'm still kind of working on it. It's kind of like been a long, drawn-out process of trying to figure out what buttons go where and what's most comfortable to use. But on my throttle, I have like afterburner, space brake, reverse. Then I have like push to talk. Then of course strafing is my little analog index finger stick, the joystick. And it's just kind of been an evolving process, trying to make sure that I don't everything feels correct when I'm using it in combat.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been performing at a high level, and I'm glad those things help you. Eritrea, I know you also changed up. You want to talk about what you're using?
So at the moment, I am using a HOTAS, the Gladiator and Gladiator NXT, and the Thrustmaster throttle, same as Drake. The throttle was what was available and affordable. That's the biggest reason why I have it. But in my history, I basically did go from mouse and keyboard to stick and mouse to a HOTAS. So I did kind of experience all of it, and I can see benefits of all of it. And it took the organization ADI to convince me to get a HOTAS a while. I was stuck on the concept that with a stick and mouse, I have the analog control of a stick with the accuracy of the mouse. But once I gave a good try to a stick in my right hand for aiming, I no longer really agree with the accuracy of the mouse.
Right. And for you, do you think, we're going to talk about PvP or human-to-human combat in a minute. Do you think you would be performing at the level you are now without a HOTAS in the PvP 2v2, 4v4 environment that we're going to get into?
Well, definitely for 1v1s, it is possible to be great with any possible setup you could think of. But I would say that the HOTAS makes it easier, that it gets me to that point much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any peripheral could be, somebody's going to master a gamepad or whatever. There's different things, but I think you nailed it on the head. And as a large organization with 7,000 plus members, that bell curve, we want to try to maximize that area that it's easiest for people to work in. And I think everyone here has made that transition, not because anyone told them to, but because it was easier and out of necessity. Water Walker, do you want to talk about your profile experiences and your peripherals?
Yeah, sure. So I started with a Thrustmaster setting with the T16000, so throttle and stick, and then I changed over to Whirlpool. So I have now started with the Whirlpool Delta stick and moved then a bit later to the Alpha stick and to the Whirlpool throttle as well. So I have a ton of buttons to bind stuff on it, especially on my throttle. And there's mostly some settings most people don't use or are not using when they're flying on their own. So like adjusting the speed limiter, or maybe the using the pinning. Pinning is very important. So
especially when your targets disappear now with these short distances, right?
Yes. So if they disappear, or even if you want to know where your flight lead is or your wingman. So at the moment we are mostly pinning each other, so that we knowing, okay, my wingman is in this direction, or he's above me or below me, so that we have more situational awareness about these things. Yeah, and of course, having your push to talk on an easy way to access it. So I have it at the moment of my pinky finger. The push to talk in the same channel where my flight members are. And all the other stuff is bound to some buttons on my throttle. So the other push to talk to other channels and org operations is also very important. But most talk will happen in your flight to communicate there, getting some actions. Yeah, and of course, countermeasures, targeting, target locks, missile launch, missile control is also very important to have it on the stick, and also the shield settings.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys are all
And-
missing the most important Star Citizen keybind.
What is that, Thornister?
Self-destruct. You need to deal with the features.
You know, on my profile, I don't have self-destruct, but maybe you're a little more suicidal than I am.
No, I just find more features than you.
I have
Well-
flown it to a switch on my HOTAS. So this is covered by a small cap. And there I have my self-destruct and the ejection, so that I can easily access it. But it's still protected for accidentally be hit.
You know, there's some discussion in the chat right now about game pads, and I did mention that, and I want to say that unfortunately, I think Star Citizen's default HOTAS profiles are out of date and behind. Their gamepad profile, although it's got some weird stuff, we have to have a modifier to do some of the axis you need to fly, actually has everything in it that you would pretty much need for a profile. So I don't know that it would be a great for combat. I'm sure someone will master that because people just have insane skills. But I do feel that, you know, it's not a judgment on any peripheral or what you do or don't have. I think that when we're talking about flying together, again, flying and fighting together, we're talking about a greater requirement that you might need for mining and salvage or any other kind of things that are out there. So again, this is pretty specific to us. Thornister, what did you start flying with, and what are you flying with now?
So I started flying mouse and keyboard, but after my first formation flying session, I quickly bought a Thrustmaster joystick and throttle. Unfortunately, the Thrustmaster 16K is a great beginner joystick, but especially the twist will start failing rapidly. So I also bought one of those VKB sticks, amazing for the price. And I'm still using the Thrustmaster throttle. I recently found some guy on the internet who makes an upgrade for the throttle, because the throttle is kinda sticky. And there is an upgrade for it that adds some actual bearings to it, and now it's butter smooth, making it really amazing. It makes flying so precise. You get so much precision over your speed control, which especially in let's call them show formations is amazing. And for combat, it's slightly less necessary, but it still makes any speed adjustment you need to make because your opponent does something unexpected, a lot nicer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the important parts for immersion for me is about enjoying flying.
Yeah.
And one of the passions I had about making my profile was to make it so that I enjoyed Star Citizen more. The you know, when I was doing combat flight sims, Falcon BMS, which is a free mod for Falcon 4, someone had made a profile for the Warthog, and it was such a relief to me to just download this, learn it, and everything worked, and it made me a better pilot. So those little differences can mean a lot. And speaking of immersion and differences, not only did Scientifico switch from a mouse and keyboard to a joystick, not just any joystick, but the one I was using and my profile, but he also got eye tracking. So Scientifico, I don't want to stop you from talking more about your profile or the profile and what you like, but let's also talk about the difference of going to head tracking and what that meant for you.
So for formation flying in particular, and honestly any combat situation in Star Citizen, at least as far as flying is concerned, eye tracking or head tracking has been really invaluable. Situational awareness in its own right is very important for a lot of this stuff. Oftentimes, especially in formation flying, when you're doing these coordinated turns in a formation, it's pretty easy to lose the guy you're trying to follow. So like having something like Track IR or a Tobii eye tracker where you can just kind of glance over to where the fight lead is makes it a lot easier to stay in formation. And of course, in the case of combat, being able to track your target, regardless of where they are in your like windshield periphery, is very invaluable as well. Makes it easier to like say overshoot and whip back around on a guy that passed you or something like that. And I'll say that the Tobii eye tracker I have right now, it's super intuitive to use. It's mind blowing actually how intuitive it was. I thought it was going to be a little funky, but it feels like actually flying a real plane, where you just like glance down and you can kind of see like your instruments exactly how you think you would, and it's not really, shall we say, disorienting to me at all. It certainly takes the immersion up to the next level.
Well, and we all game for different reasons. For me, it's a chance to do things that, I'm probably never going to do. I'm probably never going to fly a real F-16. I'm probably never going to fly in space, but I get to enjoy that. And having that added immersion along with the combat effectiveness given to the situational awareness, you put all those together in a package. And I think, you can take a lower skill set and achieve more, but then you put them all together. And I think it's really helps people get to a new level.
Absolutely.
There was a comment in the chat about having desktop real estate. I am not sponsored by, and the show is not sponsored by, but Monster Tech has these cool things that will clamp onto the end of your desk that you can get that will clamp on and off easy. So if you need some desktop real estate, you might want to look at that. But getting back to what we're talking about here, for me, I think that getting into all of the different types of joysticks and profiles is a fascinating and a long topic, and maybe in a future show we could have something dedicated to it. But I think that it's important to understand, again, we're talking about trying to really push the needs for these kinds of things to a higher level than your average cargo pilot might find or your average mining and salvage pilot. So it's interesting to see that when we're working as a team and flying together, that we have a different requirement, because a lot of times we see streamers and different people doing dual joysticks, and they may be better for 1v1, but we're not trying to fight 1v1. We're trying to fight with our teammates. Again, we're in a very large org. We have a lot of people. Our biggest benefit is to use that to our advantage and to have a lot of teamwork. So does anybody else here on our panel have anything to say about joysticks and profiles and how it helped them before we move on?
I just want to say something about the dual stick things.
Yeah.
So, if you're using dual sticks, or what you see a lot of on YouTube and the streams is when they are doing the 1v1, I would call it a flea fight. So if you're looking about some fleas flying around in your room and they meet each other, they start spinning around each other, facing them, getting into a crumble, getting out, back to a crumble. And that's mostly the same as you see at the moment in Star Citizen. The problem there is they are using a lot of strafing, and strafing is a bad thing if you fly with someone else. So you want to have good control, predictable maneuvers, so that the other people know where is your wingman or your wing lead. So you would try to avoid strafing in the normal situations. If you're going to be defensive, it's a different story. But for this, it's better to have a HOTAS, because you can more precisely control your speed. So if you have a dual stick, you would always push forward your left stick to get some speed, getting it back to reduce the speed. And that could be a bit complicated, and it's easier for the feeling if you're doing it with a HOTAS or with a throttle. Yeah, and the problem there is also, if you're doing this flea fight thing, there's a high possibility that you crash into a different ship. So if you don't have a 1v1, if you have a 1v2 or 1v4, and you're going strafing in a direction where you can't see, even with a head tracking device, when you're moving your head to the left or to the right to look out of your cockpit window, if you can't see the other people, it will happen that you crash into it.
You
and
know,
we already had it in our tests.
Yeah, we did. And you took the thoughts right out of my head in that, if we are looking at the scale of Star Citizen and some large org-on-org conflict, which I look forward to, and you have 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 ships on a side, I don't care how good your profile is, your joystick, your situational awareness, or your eye tracking, if you got a bunch of flea flights going around in circles and it's, a large group, I don't think it's possible to do without probably more people crashing into each other than kill each other. What do you think, Ertria?
Deconfliction is a huge thing, and we are still struggling with it in our training exercises to this day. And I am the odd one here. I am a big fan of strafing. So far, it hasn't been given too much of an issue, especially since I got head tracking, just homemade, as you can probably see. And you do have to look at the radical, look at your vector, radical vector. So strafing definitely does add complexity, but at the same time, it does make you harder to hit. But for deconfliction, we haven't yet found a simple, solid solution to that. It's something you have to always look at your radar, look at your pinned targets that you should have your wingman pinned, and have really good idea what's happening around you.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry, did you have something, Water Walker?
There was a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to
go over in a minute.
Yeah, I was going to go over that now, actually. So if I understand the question correctly, when you plug in your throttle by default, Star Citizen has if you had 100% forward and back, at the 50% point is where you go forward and then back to 0. And then from this point backwards is where you go to reverse your thrust. Now, there's only one joystick that I know of that has a detent in the center by default. I've seen what I believe is some devs using that joystick. So for them, maybe that's a good thing. For me, in my profile, and what I recommend is that you have it just like a fighter jet. You have 0 to 100. That extra fidelity is very important. And if you want to see an example of that, try landing on a landing pad with your speed limiter all the way up. And it's kind of nerve-wracking. Bring that speed limiter down to where your max speed is 50, 75 meters per second. And that extra precision is a lot greater and more important. Now, this does mean that you are using basically what's called flight straightforward, and you have to have a reverse button so that when you push that button, you can now fly in reverse. So to me, I think to having the 0 to 100 and that full range is much more important. I don't know, Scientifico, you're using the same joystick I have. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. There's very few times in Star Citizen where I feel like I actually need to reverse. So it makes sense to me to have it on a toggle. Absolutely. And yeah, like you say, the fidelity of having the whole range to adjust your speed is very beneficial, especially for those coordinated turns, once again, in formation flying. Yeah, especially with like my Warthog throttle without a detent in the middle, having it go from 100 to -100 is just a recipe for disaster, in my opinion, because you'll just always, unless you have like a huge dead zone for where 0 throttle is, it's going to be really hard to actually come to a stop.
No, I will say, and I agree with that, and that's why I don't have a center detent. It's really hard. I wouldn't know where I am. I will say that I have made the mistake of not knowing if I had my reverse thrust or not. I wish there was a red indication in the HUD that was like REV or something, and it was flashing so that you knew you were in reverse thrust. And I mean, and it can be used to your advantage. There's some combat maneuvers and things you can do with it, but I feel like that fidelity is just far more important than whatever ease of use there might be in perception from having that center point be the reverse thrust. Any other thoughts on that from the group?
For a
I've
while,
even
had
removed the. Go ahead, Adria.
I had 0 in the middle of the throttle travel, and I had forward and backwards. And it seemed natural when I was doing the flea fight for ball with 1v1, where I would want to go forward and forward to keep at the same ideal distance from the enemy. And I hard moded my Thrustmaster throttle to have a detent. So it was easy enough to find that. But the fidelity of changing it to the 0 to 100 forward and with a button reverse made a big difference. And I am fan. I have been converted.
It's a religion. Anyone else want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm using the full 100% fidelity as well, and I used to use a button for reverse, but I found that I occasionally clicked it inadvertently, and like you said, there is no way of knowing, so I just removed it. And if I ever have a need to go reverse, I'll just stick my arm out and use the S key on the keyboard. I mean,
That's
I find that
interesting.
I so rarely need to fly in reverse. It's usually just for landing if I overshot the landing pad. Or for if those stupid landing hangars in Lorville. But other than that, it's just, I mean, I'm a fighter pilot. I fly forward.
You
I
know,
fly
it's
towards the enemy.
yeah. It's
That's mostly the thing we need to keep in mind. So different setups for different type of gameplay is very important. So for fighter pilots, these 0 to 100 is really important. But if you're flying a tugboat like the Argo SRV or doing mining, reverse thrust would be very important for you. Or if you're going to ground, there maybe is a gamepad more flexible to use than mouse and keyboard or throttle and stick. So it always depends what are you flying, what you want to do, and have the right control for what you want to do in the game. Is the best setups there. So there's no wrong, there's no fault. It always depends on the situation.
absolutely. And you know, Thornister, you just mentioned using a button, the S button on your keyboard sometimes. And it's amazing. This is one of the things I love about being in an org and working with people is I've spent, I don't know, countless hours and revisions of the profile that I have out there. And if you want to see it, you can go to CaliJoshua 63 at Twitter. There's some links to it there. But I'm just thinking now that maybe I could add an S button as a modified state to maybe the speed brake, and you could have that quick burst in reverse. So I love that input. I love that feedback. I'm going to try to incorporate that into the next iteration of the profile. I think there might be some merit to that. Now, anything else before we move on? I think we should go on to our next segment here.
Rudder pedals. I keep forgetting to mention that. As I mentioned already, I am a big fan of strafing, so I want to have analog controls with good amount of travel for every axis. And rudder pedals are a big help for that.
Yeah,
I got
absolutely.
them actually before I got my throttle.
Really? What was the decision key for getting that versus the throttle first?
Didn't have enough axes on my stick and mouse, so I couldn't strafe left, right, roll with the analog controls with good enough travel distance.
That's interesting because I do wonder about using your feet for aiming the ship a little bit if you got fixed weapons, or even gimbaled, you know, getting it in the right position versus a dual stick for the perfect aiming. But again, we're talking about flying and fighting together. So I'm kind of curious. I need to adjust mine. I am not capable. I know some people are using their stick for, you know, yawing. I can't do that because I'm going to continue to fly combat fighter sims. And I don't think I could go back and forth. My brain would just get dewired. So I'm going to stick with what I have. But it's interesting to see that. Moving on to segment number 4 here, we're going to talk about PvP, and this can be a little bit of a sensitive topic because people can give hurt feelings and there can be emotions involved. But when we're doing this, we're doing it in a way to understand and break down how people fight and work together. So we go to uncontrolled space, we have specific goals, and we don't carry egos with us. In fact, I think I remember in some of our debriefs where I think we had Thornister in a bad way. We had his ship red and his shields down, and we kept attacking him because, well, it was what seemed best to do at the time, and he was the weakest link. And afterwards, no one bragged about, oh, I killed Thornister, and Thornister wasn't upset about it. We were literally talking about, hey, yeah, I knew I did this, I got in trouble. And so I don't want to say it's analytical and clinical, but we're not doing this to be, killing each other and thinking who's better. We're really doing it to understand how to work and fight together as a team. So I want to throw that out there because PvP is an important part of what we're going to be doing as an org and what we need to do to train. But it can be emotional. It needs to be done the right way with the right group.
Yeah,
So
I would say it's analytical and clinical. We even make videos of what we do and we analyze them.
yeah, and we're watching part of that now.
Exactly.
Yeah, and mostly the important thing is here that it's not a competition for us. So it's not here for having who's the best fighter pilot, who got the most kills, who's the loser in our testing. So we are trying things out, and we want to evolve. We want to evolve as a group, and that's part of our matchmaking here, so that we have a clear condition. We are in a set up space for us, which we can control. So we have no simulation boundaries there. So that's why we are not using the arena commander for these things. We are looking for a space where we are on our own, where no other player gets into it, and we are testing things out. What's working for whom it's best. Everybody has its benefits or maybe his dismiss here. So Atria is, for example, very good in defensive maneuvers. Thornister is really good to setting up some exercise sessions or thinking about some tasks we could try out, how they function if it's a new tactic. Drake has a good shooting accuracy. And all these things together in our group makes it very important and making an advantage against other people who fly on their own.
But you didn't say anything nice about me. I'm kidding.
Yeah, there are some special things. So we have the so-called CaliJoshua maneuver. And this is mostly crashing into the ship directly when the start.
No. He's helping us with deconfliction training.
Yeah. Well, that comes from, flying an atmosphere in fighter jets. You don't think about, using transversal speed and the closing distances are so fast. So I think I've done some practice, and someone mentioned before about doing some bounties in asteroid fields, and I've practiced using that, actually doing those bounties. So I'm going to try not to be the killer, the ram killer anymore. So we'll see. But, when we did this, I guess I have a way of breaking things. And when we first went into PvP, I wanted to give these guys something totally different that they wouldn't see an AI do. And knowing that our HUDs don't have drop shadows, and we've talked about that before in HangarReady, and if Star Citizen is listening, please upgrade the HUD to have some drop shadows. I decided to line myself up in a position where I could turn into the sun quickly and just afterburner a wheel. And to me, I wanted to present just that different picture and to show that there's a thinking behind PvP that's not there in AI. Drake, when I first did that, what did you think about that?
Well, it was it became very hard to see where you're at, pretty much in a nutshell. Yeah, that's something that's been a problem with Star Citizen, I feel, for a while. Is just the fact that there's no contrast difference between your HUD and the background. So if you're flying like on Port Tressler, or not Port Tressler, but if you're flying on Microtech where there's a white background, or if you're flying into the sun, or something like that, it's just there's no contrast difference. So it makes it hard to tell like the direction that you were flying in, how fast you were going, or I couldn't even see your pip to tell exactly where you're at, distance. I had to look down at my MFD just to see how far away you were, to see if you were in range of my weapons. So yeah, it can definitely cause some issues. Hopefully it'll be something that'll be fixed.
Well, and that was my intention. I wanted to cause some disorientation from the beginning, and
Yeah.
I like to break things, so it happens. For me, one of the things I wanted to do was I had not seen the AI do what I consider a lot of engagement and then disengage. I know that there might be some reasons we get into technically that's happening on the servers where they're not getting the information they need, but I presented myself as trying to attack you guys, manage my shields, and work from a perspective of what I can engage in and disengage to regenerate my shields and to, again, just present a different way than the AI was. Because I don't consider myself to be the best Star Citizen pilot by far. I still have some ways to go to get up to where some of these guys are, and I need to do more practice to do that. But then, in addition to working with the shields management, I started using missiles and sending you guys defensive in a combat jet. Sometimes you'll send a missile early just to get them defensive to get the upper hand. It's part of the mental game that happens when you have a beyond visual range engagement, which I hope we get. That beyond visual range is a chess match of positioning, movement, speed, the angles of which your sensors can engage. There's a lot that actually happens in that space that is a fun game of mental chess. Here we're much more compressed and closer, but I'm looking forward to that beyond visual range. But it did work. I could, when there was two of you guys against me, I could send one of you defensive and try to have a moment where I was back to a 1v1. So there was some things in that space that we did. But Thornister, you had seen what this difference was from the things I had done. How did this compare to what we were doing before with the AI and kind of having those preset speeds and the preset formations and the preset turns and all of that? What was your impression as soon as we got involved with some PvP?
Oh, it fell completely apart. Everything we worked on, all the tactics we devised, and we evolved and sharpened, it just did not work at all. The big difference, it turns out, that a human, actual intellectual human, will do as opposed to what the AI does is engage you. The human will shoot back at all times, whereas it's really easy to fly away from an AI opponent. If you fly away from a human, he'll just think, hey, that's a nice rear end, let's shoot a missile into it. So our tactics of booming and zooming information just did not work at all. We had to completely adapt a new tactic. I'm glad that we did it because we learned a lot about communicating in a fight, situational awareness stuff. There were great stepping stones, but as a tactic, it did not work at all.
And what kind of things did you have to change with the formations and whatnot to accommodate, me breaking the AI stuff?
Well, what we eventually started doing was flying in a loose formation so that there would always be at least one fighter attacking the bandit. So that way, it makes it a lot harder for the enemy to disrupt what we as a pair are trying to do. And even if one of us needs to go defensive because we're being pressured too hard or you're being nasty and you're sending a missile, the other guy is still pressuring you. So you cannot, at your leisure, take me apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of communication, Water Walker, what did you think maybe changed with how you guys were communicating?
It was much shorter and more precise. So changing from attacking and going defensive, for example, or calling out if the enemy is switching this target. So if an enemy or an opponent is after me, for example, and I'm going defensive and try to get away, evade his missiles, his shoots, and my wingman starts shooting at him, then maybe the enemy is switching over to attacking him, to calling out, hey, switch targets, please rejoin. So going back, know where he is, start attacking again. So making constant pressure on the opponent to have him shields down, attacking him from different directions, and also use the other people when we have a 4v1 or 4v2, so that we can switch the elements on attacking the opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. And, having higher speeds and faster turns and more maneuvers and those rapid speed and direction changes, that really is where we're talking about earlier with these HOTASs coming in and the individual skill that's required. Scientifico, when you came into that practice with us that day, how much more time do you think you would take you to get up to speed to that extra learning curve that these guys are at now? Because again, you skipped the AI stuff and you jumped right into PvP.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have to unlearn any of the AI stuff they were doing, so that probably would help me a little bit. But yeah, it'd probably take, gosh, like if we beat, you guys have been doing what, like 2 hours per session? You've been doing it about
sometimes
like
longer.
Sometimes longer. So like probably, oh gosh, yeah, maybe 30 hours to at least get my foothold in the right place, I guess.
Yeah, and as far as situational awareness, I know you're new to the Tobii eye tracker, but do you think that is going to take some time to maximize that curve as well?
I mean, with the eye tracking, like I said before, it felt pretty intuitive to me, so I'm not sure if that's really gonna be too much of an issue. I think for me, it'd be more of awareness of like where my teammates are, and also like speed control relative to the target would probably be the biggest things I'd need to work on.
Yeah. So
we're working really hard in making up exercises to speed up this process. So whereas we mostly had to invent the wheel ourselves, we're trying to get to a state where we can bring in someone new and with a dedicated set of exercises, get someone up to our level a lot faster than it took us.
absolutely. And again, that's back to the benefit of being in a large org and having a training program. And, the countless hours that this group has dedicated are the blood, sweat, and tears that are going to build that foundation that's going to help us be successful in Star Citizen. So absolutely. Speaking of that, though, Thornister, I know that, shot placement is something you consider to be important. How long do you think it took you to adjust to the shot placement difference from AI versus fighting against PvP?
Oh, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I think I've spent 20 hours just dedicated practicing by now on my shot placement alone, and I'm not good enough yet. I mean, this definitely is a point where there is a large benefit of being in a large org, because, I mean, quantity is a quality all of its own. But you do need to be able to get your ordnance on target, because, I mean, there are these elite fighters out there who are so bloody good that if you're not managing to pressure them, they will kill all 4 of their opponents in a 1v4. So, I mean, I do not have to be the level of those elite fighters if I'm doing things right within my org and I'm bringing in more people than the enemy has, but I still need to be able to pressure them.
Absolutely.
So, for me, I mean, the whole shoot, move, communicate thing, they're all equally important.
Absolutely. And, you built a great exercise. And in that exercise, we have someone that's attacking and someone that's trying not to be shot. And of course, like everything, I broke it. I'm the only only rabbit that killed the fox trying to hunt him. But that was due to a collision, not due to shooting. And, but that skill set that is developed in that training, helps increase the shot accuracy of everybody. I know just doing it one time for me, I was like, wow, this is really showing me that I'm going to need to adjust some of my sensitivity curves in the game and helping me just to get that shot placement on. In fact, I think I was behind the curve a bit because I didn't do as much of the AI stuff as you guys have, but I've gone back now and hopefully gotten a little better with it. But I think it's important to understand that that basic skill set and level is something that with the right training, I think we can get pilots up to much, much quicker than we've gone through as this group, right? I think that's an important message to know. So again, if you're looking for an organization, you want to be a better pilot, we might know one for you.
To jump in here, so there's something special here what we are doing in our training sessions. So we are not only flying all the time around and shooting at each other. We have some briefing in front of it. We have some debriefing after it to discuss, okay, what we learned, what functioned, what we need to change for the next session. We are writing things down so that we can discuss it later or have a look on what we have done, what worked, what not worked, how our feelings are during the fight. If it was okay, if we got too much pressure, if we want to change something. So this is really important. And so mostly the 100 hours we spent here to get to the actual level and what you're seeing in the background, there's additionally maybe 100 hour where we're talking about this stuff or thinking about it on our own. So Sonas are taking a lot of time to think about these exercises, put it down in a document. We are testing it out if it's functions. Sometimes it's going to function, sometimes it's not functioning, and we are getting to the next steps then again. And these recaps are very important here so that we can use our experience here to build up trainings for our members so that they can get a benefit. And I hope that we can get there somewhere in the next month so that the people here in our org also participate on our training stuff.
You know, to me, one of the most critical parts of what I've seen with this group and what makes this so fun is we've had so many evolutions of where we started just flying together, trying to shoot AI, and then in the PvP, the different tactics we've developed. And, you know, I've had ideas that made you guys shoot at me when I was just the observer because they were so boring. The tactics were so long and drawn out. But then the amazing part is you guys would think about something, come back with something new, and then we would take this to another step. And then it would happen again at another step. And we'd have notes and people would think about it in another step. And I'm just so impressed with where we've gotten to, and I just enjoy it so much. So, you know, I hope that the training reflects that. I hope that people take advantage of that. And I hope more people join us. We have the formation flying. How many nights a week are we doing that right now, Thornister?
Depends on the season. I mean, we are approaching the summer slow season, so we're slowing down a little. So we're doing it twice a month now.
Okay.
But in the winter season, it's twice a week.
Okay. So for anyone that's, you know, wants to begin this process, that formation flying is really important to where we got here. And we've learned a lot throughout these sessions. In fact, Artria, you had a fun missile incident. You want to talk about that?
That was the point where we started truly noticing that what currently works in the patch we are fighting in can make a big difference, the meta. And that it's not even a meta, it's much more of an oddity that not many people know about, but there is a missile that can stop your shield from regenerating. And when we are doing a fight against a skilled pilot, they shot me with that missile, and the fight dynamic completely changed. I was basically out of the fight, and I was just trying to stay close enough to others so they can fight, while not dying. And we later had some more fun with those missiles.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We started then, so after we saw that you are using this missile against us, we started to incorporate it in our own tactics, so that we directly shoot missiles at you at the beginning of the fight to take out your shields, and then have an advantage against you. So also trying to learn from new situations and incorporate it in our training sessions is a very important thing here.
And I think what we're really getting into is that PvP is pretty hard, and that, you know, it took a lot of hours for us to get here, but I think those hours were worth it. Now, I wasn't a part of this, and I know you guys went into the PU and got some people that were willing to engage you. Water Walker, you want to talk about some of the examples of when you guys went in the PU and how this training helped?
Yeah, so sometimes when we started our sessions or ending the sessions, and we are reaching again our starting base, so for example, Port Olisar, and we had there some red enemies. So Port Olisar was in the last patch the place to go if you want to have some PvP fun. So we saw some players which are attacking others, and we are trying to start a fight with what we have learned, fighting as a group against them, and we made them a really hard time. So it always depends on the ships. So we are doing it at the moment with light fighters, so mostly Gladius or Auroras, because we want to have an easy entry point for our org members to get into this and don't need to have the high-class tier ships, which cost a lot of real money or in-game money. So to have a cheap alternative to do these exercises. And we're starting with these light fighters against a heavy upgraded Banyu Defender, for example. And we made him a very hard time during the fight. So he'd taken out one or two of our pilots, of course. But we get damn close to him. And it's always that we are getting back a good fight. Thanks for the fight. Do you want to come back and have some more fun with me? So it's not that bad thing to have these fights in Star Citizen. So if there's an enemy hanging around at Port Olisar, and if someone wants to engage him, he's fighting back. But if there's players who want to evade and going on their own, they don't follow them. So that's a good practice. So that are not the assholes you have somewhere else, like the pet rammers. But our tactics works. So we constant pressure on these people. These shields went down, and sometimes they needed to go defensive and flying away to recharge their shields before they come back. And that's exactly what we want to do here. So that we are with 4 people against one opponent, making so much pressure that he's evading and not coming back.
So the small fighters working together were punching above their weight, as Star Citizen says sometimes in their propaganda?
Yes, it's working.
Interesting. Thornister, what was your take on going into the PU and applying this against other people you hadn't seen before?
Well, first of all, it's amazing fun.
Yes.
So all the hard work does pay off in the end. It is worth it. It's taking a lot of time to get where we are, but to see that with 3-4 really small fighters, you can take on bigger opponents and have a decent chance of success. That's an amazing feeling. Sure, it didn't work out all the time. We screwed up once or twice, but when it works, when the communication flows and you see them run away, that's amazing.
And do you think, just for argument's sake, these are going to work with medium and large fighters, these same tactics?
It's one of the, I mean, like Walter said, we are practicing with Auroras that are stupidly small ships, slow ships. Well, that's basically your heavy fighter. Except that, of course, the heavy fighter has a lot more armament and a lot more shielding, but they're also slow. So absolutely, it will work.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and what we are doing with the Auroras is, for example, putting their heavy shield generators in it, very cheap weapons, so that we can have longer fights to learn more.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to more of this. I know we're coming towards the close of the show here. If anybody in the audience has questions, we'd love to take a few minutes to answer them if there's any in there. While we're waiting for those, Drake, what was your experience like going into the PU?
It's just it's a good opportunity for me to practice what I've learned. Like we do all these training exercises amongst ourselves out in the middle of nowhere, so we don't get any crime stats. But yeah, it's hard to know exactly how well the training is working out for me until we kind of apply it in the PU, like fighting people that are camping Port Olisar or maybe even Grimhex, something like that. So it's just a good opportunity to practice, really, because that's something I still need to work on.
Yeah, and having fun. I think with all the seriousness and the clinicalness that we've talked about with training, having some fun and enjoying the game is actually the purpose. But doing it in this new way with teammates is one of the things that motivates me. When I was first involved with this group, we did a milsim where we had guys on the ground and I could provide air support. And when I was able to be effective for them and work together as a team, that's the most fun I've had. And I'm looking forward to more of that in Star Citizen. What about you, Artria?
Well, the switch to PU to random players, there was a big difference, especially in that a random player that is red can be one of the best pilots in the game, or someone new who accidentally rammed some ships. So it is a bit of a loot box. So I very much see positive of fighting with people are on a similar level. But then again, the fact that you never know what you're going into can also be a big positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, it's been so much fun. And I'm assuming Scientifico, you're looking forward to joining us for more time and getting up to speed like I need to.
Oh yeah, for sure. I got a lot more time now that I'm done with finals too. So
you and finals, man.
Electrical engineering's hard. What can I say?
So you're going to go work for Robert Space Industries and designing ships? Is that what you're telling us?
Maybe not with an electrical engineering degree, but they seem to care more about visuals over there. But
yes, we will get into that. Well, anyhow, I want to thank all of our Fighter Mafia panel members. This is the first time any of them have been in the hot seat. This has been my first time hosting, so I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. It's been a good time to sit here and talk about it and see the direction we're going. If you're a part of our org, look forward to the future and seeing this come out to everyone. There will be another episode of HangarReady coming up on the 26th at 2 p.m. Again, that's 2 p.m. Central Time on the 26th of this month. And we look forward to having you on that show. And I'll just double check really quick here to see if there's any more questions. I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Tody. We're glad that you appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to thank everyone for your time, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Yeah.